All right, so today we're diving into some pretty fascinating territory. You ever wonder, like, why we feel the things we feel?
Oh, absolutely.
Or we experience things like love or fear or joy or even, despair.
Mm-hmm.
What if I told you that by looking at science, and specifically evolutionary psychology, we might begin to uncover some answers to these like age-old questions?
Well, it's a truly captivating field.
Right.
Evolutionary psychology really delves into the idea that our minds, our emotions, our very behaviors are all shaped by millions of years of evolution.
So it's almost like our brains are carrying around a blueprint from the past, right?
Exactly.
It's influencing our present.
Yeah.
I think we all know, kind of about Darwin's theory of evolution, survival of the fittest. But how does that actually connect to something as complex as human emotions?
Well, think of it this way. Emotions drive behaviors.
Okay.
So take, for instance, a mother's love for her child.
Right.
It's an incredibly powerful emotion. It inspires protective behaviors. From an evolutionary perspective, mothers who had genes that actually promoted nurturing behavior were more likely to have their offspring survive.
Makes sense.
And of course, if those children survive, those same genes get passed down.
So the feeling of love itself, in a way, is driven by the need to ensure the survival of certain genes. That's pretty profound when you think about it.
It is.
Okay.
And it's important to remember that we're not talking about conscious intention on the part of the genes themselves.
Yeah.
It's more about natural selection, favoring those traits, including emotional responses that actually increase the chances of survival and ultimately passing on those genes.
That kind of brings us to, I think, a pretty intriguing concept, the selfish gene. I remember reading about that in Richard Dawkins' book. I mean, it really got me thinking.
Absolutely. Dawkins' book was groundbreaking, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He argued that genes are the real drivers of evolution and that organisms, including us, humans, are essentially vehicles for these genes to replicate and continue spreading. And when he uses the term selfish, he doesn't mean that genes have these actual conscious desires.
Right.
It's more of a metaphor to explain how genes that are good at replicating themselves actually become more and more common through generations.
So it's like a competition between genes.
Exactly.
Where the best replicators win, right?
Yes.
And is that where the analogy of the peacock's tail comes in?
Yes.
Because it's a beautiful trait. It attracts mates.
Right.
But it also seems like it could make the peacock more vulnerable to predators.
That's a great example. The peacock's tail really kind of illustrates how evolution can lead to traits that seem, at first glance, counterintuitive.
Right.
Because the male with the more extravagant tail is more likely to attract a mate,
of course,
increasing his chances of passing on his genes, even if it comes with some added risk.
So, okay, so we've got these genes that are driving behavior. They're even shaping, complex emotions, all to ensure their survival. Yeah. But how does this actually play out in our daily lives? I mean, how can we see this evolutionary programming kind of in action?
Well, that's where things get really interesting because our minds are constantly running simulations.
Simulations?
Yeah, to try and predict and navigate the world around us. So think about it for a second. From imagining a conversation with a crush to planning, let's say, a work presentation.
Sure.
Our brains are working overtime, playing out different scenarios, trying to anticipate those potential outcomes.
So even when I'm like daydreaming or worrying about something, my mind is actually running these simulations based on this ancient evolutionary programming.
Exactly. And from an evolutionary standpoint, having that ability to simulate, different scenarios effectively would have given our ancestors a huge advantage.
Yeah.
In survival and reproduction. They could mentally test different approaches to situations like, let's say, hunting or social interactions or escaping danger, all without the real-life risks of trial and error.
That makes a lot of sense. So we're not just reacting to the world. We're trying to predict, manipulate.
Absolutely.
This incredible ability might be a direct result of evolution favoring those who could kind of think.
Precisely. It's like having a built-in strategy guide for life. And what's fascinating is that we're not alone in this. Even our closest primate relatives, chimpanzees, use rudimentary forms of simulation to navigate social situations, making decisions about things like mating and alliances.
So even our primate cousins are running these mental simulations. This is already changing the way I think about my own thought processes.
It's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to explore when it comes to evolutionary psychology and how it shapes our experiences.
And what about emotions like, fear and jealousy? Where do those fit into this kind of evolutionary picture?
Well, those emotions can also be understood through this lens of evolution. So, for example, fear. Fear is absolutely crucial for survival.
Yeah.
It's a powerful motivator. It helps us avoid danger. In the past, our ancestors who weren't afraid of things like predators or dangerous storms,
Sure.
they were less likely to survive and pass on their genes.
Right, because fear keeps us safe.
Mhm.
That's a no-brainer. But what about something like jealousy? I mean, that doesn't seem quite as useful.
Well, jealousy, although often an unpleasant emotion, likely evolved to protect reproductive interests. So in a primal sense, it's about ensuring that your mate doesn't stray, safeguarding your genetic lineage.
So even our most complex emotions, both positive and negative, they might be rooted in this primal need to survive and to pass on our genes.
Yeah.
It's incredible to think about how these ancient forces could still be influencing us today.
Exactly. And this brings us to an even more complex and fascinating aspect of evolutionary psychology. The idea that even something as seemingly pure and unconditional as parental love might have nuances when viewed through an evolutionary lens.
Wait, are you suggesting that a parent might love one child more than another for evolutionary reasons?
I mean, of course, we're not talking about conscious choices
Right.
or intentions here, but evolutionary theory suggests that parents might unconsciously invest more in offspring who appear healthier or stronger or more likely to successfully reproduce.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because those children represent a better investment, so to speak, when it comes to passing on their genes.
That's a really complex idea to kind of wrap your head around, but I can see how it might have played out in a world where, resources were scarce and...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it leads us to a sensitive but important topic, child abuse. And it's crucial to emphasize that evolutionary explanations in no way justify this abhorrent behavior.
Of course. Of course. Yeah.
However, evolutionary psychology can offer some insights into why child abuse might be more prevalent in certain family structures, like, let's say, stepfamily.
Because there's no direct genetic link.
Precisely. From an evolutionary standpoint, stepparents don't have the same, inherent biological imperative to protect children who don't carry their genes. Again, this does not excuse the behavior in any way, but it might help explain certain statistical trends.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack here. So even the emotions that we consider, most sacred, like a parent's love for their child, might be influenced by these deep-seated evolutionary drives.
It's a complex reality to confront, but understanding these evolutionary influences doesn't diminish the importance of love or compassion or moral responsibility. It simply adds another layer of understanding to the human experience.
Definitely makes you think about human nature in a whole new way.
It certainly does, and it leads us to an even more profound question. If our minds are essentially these sophisticated simulation machines, products of millions of years of evolution, does that leave any room for something like true enlightenment?
That is a huge question. Are you talking about enlightenment in the sense of like achieving perfect peace and understanding, like a state of being free from suffering?
Exactly. If our minds are constantly simulating, predicting, striving, can we ever truly escape the influence of those deeply ingrained evolutionary drives? Can we ever truly transcend them?
That makes me think about, Buddhist teachings and the idea of detaching from desire to achieve a state of nirvana. Are those concepts even possible from an evolutionary psychology perspective?
It's a fascinating parallel. Even the most disciplined meditator, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, can't fully escape the workings of their evolved mind.
Yeah.
Our brains are wired for survival and reproduction.
Right.
Those primal urges are always going to be there, bubbling beneath the surface.
So even if we dedicate ourselves to spiritual practices and intellectual pursuits, are we still ultimately bound by the limitations of our evolutionary past?
In a sense, yes. It suggests that complete freedom from suffering, at least in the way we typically conceive of it, might be a biological impossibility.
That's a pretty radical and humbling idea to consider.
Yeah.
So even with all of our advancements as a species, are we still essentially these products of evolution?
Yes.
Driven by primal urges that we might not even be fully aware of?
It's a humbling thought, isn't it?
It is.
And it makes you wonder if our brains are indeed stuck in this cycle of simulation. Could technology offer us a way to break free?
Technology. Are you talking about something like a brain-computer interface that could actually alter our neural pathways?
Exactly. Imagine if we could use technology to rewire those deep-seated evolutionary circuits. Could we, in essence, hack our own evolution and reach a whole new level of consciousness?
That sounds like something straight out of science fiction. But it's a fascinating and incredibly thought-provoking concept to consider. Could we potentially free ourselves from these limitations that we've been discussing, from those primal urges that might be holding us back?
It's certainly within the realm of possibility, although such advancements would come with, profound ethical implications to consider as well.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where fear, jealousy, even aggression could be eliminated.
Right.
Would we still be human? What would we become?
Those are some really big questions, and I think they deserve a deep dive of their own. It's incredible to think about the possibilities that lie ahead, especially when we consider the incredible power of technology and how rapidly it's advancing.
It is an exciting time to be alive, isn't it? To think that we might have the potential to shape our own evolutionary destiny. It really is. The potential is exhilarating and a little daunting.
Absolutely. But for now, let's bring it back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about these overarching concepts,
All right.
evolution, the selfish gene, and how our minds might be these incredible simulation machines.
Right.
But how does this actually translate to our understanding of specific human emotions and behaviors?
Well, that's a great question. And I think it's important to remember that evolutionary psychology isn't about providing simple deterministic answers.
Right.
It's about offering a framework for understanding the complexities of human nature.
So it's not about saying, because of evolution, you will always act this way. It's more about recognizing that evolution has shaped, certain tendencies or predispositions.
Exactly. Think of it as a set of guidelines, not hard and fast rules.
Okay.
And when it comes to emotions and behaviors, evolutionary psychology can provide some really interesting insights into why we react to certain situations the way we do.
Okay. So can we dive into some specific examples? I'm really curious to see how this all plays out in real life.
Absolutely. Let's start with something we've already touched upon. Parental love.
Okay.
We tend to think of parental love as, this pure, selfless instinct.
Right.
And in many ways, it is. But evolutionary psychology suggests that it might not be as simple as we think.
You're talking about the idea that parents might unconsciously favor certain children over others.
Yes. Now, this doesn't mean that parents don't love all of their children deeply, but from an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense that parents might invest more time and energy in offspring who are perceived as having better chances of survival and reproduction.
Because those children represent a better chance of passing on their genes. It's a tough pill to swallow, but I can see the logic.
Exactly. And this isn't limited to humans either.
Oh, really?
We see similar patterns in the animal kingdom.
Okay.
For example, certain bird species might neglect weaker chicks if resources are scarce, focusing their efforts on those most likely to survive.
It's fascinating and a little bit sobering to see those parallels between human behavior and the behavior of, other animals. Are there other examples of this kind of, evolutionary logic at play in our emotions?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Take fear, for instance.
Okay.
We often think of fear as a negative emotion, something to be avoided.
Right.
But from an evolutionary perspective, fear is crucial for survival. It's a rapid response system that helps us avoid danger.
So those fight or flight instincts that kick in when we sense danger, those are actually a product of evolution.
Precisely. Our ancestors who were more fearful, more cautious, were more likely to survive encounters with predators or natural disasters, other threats.
Right, yeah.
And those survival instincts have been passed down through generations, shaping our brains to this day.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like our brains are still wired for a world that in many ways no longer exists.
Exactly. And that's one of the really fascinating things about evolutionary psychology. It helps us understand why we might react to certain modern situations in ways that seem, on the surface, illogical or counterproductive.
It's like we're carrying around this ancient operating system in our brains, trying to navigate a world that's constantly evolving.
That's a great analogy, and it can create some interesting conflicts.
Like what?
For example, our brains are wired to seek out calorie-rich foods because, for our ancestors, those foods were scarce and essential for survival.
Okay.
But in today's world, where calorie-rich foods are, readily available, that instinct can lead to overeating and health problems.
So our evolutionary programming hasn't quite caught up with the realities of modern life.
Exactly.
Interesting. And is that true for, other behaviors and emotions too?
Oh, absolutely, for a whole range of them.
Okay. So I'm starting to see how this evolutionary perspective can really change the way we think about ourselves and our place in the world.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering if we are so influenced by these ancient instincts, do we really have free will?
That's a question philosophers have been grappling with for centuries.
Right.
And evolutionary psychology definitely adds another layer of complexity to the debate. If our actions and emotions are to some extent shaped by these deeply ingrained evolutionary drives, does that mean we're not truly in control of our choices?
It's almost like we're puppets, right?
Good.
Being controlled by these invisible strings of evolution.
It's not quite that deterministic. I mean, we have the capacity for reason, for conscious decision-making, but evolutionary psychology suggests that those decisions are always going to be influenced, at least to some degree, by our evolutionary heritage.
So it's like a constant push and pull between our conscious desires and these unconscious evolutionary drives.
Exactly. And that tension is what makes us so fascinating, so complex.
This is really mind-blowing stuff. We've talked about love, fear, the drive to find food. Are there any other emotions or behaviors that can be explained through this evolutionary lens?
Oh, absolutely. Jealousy, altruism, aggression, even our sense of humor.
Right.
All of these can be viewed through the lens of evolution.
Okay.
For example, our sense of humor, something we often take for granted, likely evolved as a way to build social bonds and signal intelligence to potential mates.
Wait, so cracking jokes is actually an evolutionary strategy?
In a sense, yes. Think about it. A good sense of humor requires wit, creativity, an understanding of social dynamics. Those are all qualities that would have been attractive to our ancestors.
Wow. It's amazing to think that something as simple as laughter could have such deep evolutionary roots.
It really is. And it highlights how deeply intertwined our biology is with our behavior and our emotions. And it leads to an even bigger question.
Okay.
If our minds are indeed these sophisticated simulation machines shaped by millions of years of evolution, what does that mean for the future of humanity?
Whoa. That's a big one. Are you suggesting that evolution is still shaping us today?
Absolutely. Evolution is a continuous process.
Okay.
And while the pressures might be different in our modern world,
Right.
they are still there, subtly influencing our biology and our behavior.
So what does that mean for our future? Are we destined to become slaves to our evolutionary programming? Or can we break free and chart our own course? I mean, those are some really profound questions. It is a bit daunting, but also exciting to think about the possibilities.
It really is. And I think the answers, as with most things in life, are complex and multifaceted. We're not simply slaves to our genes, nor are we completely free agents shaping our destiny without any constraints. It's a constant interplay between nature and nurture,
Right.
between our biological heritage and our conscious choices.
So where do we go from here? If evolution is still at play, how can we kind of use this understanding to our advantage?
Right.
Can we learn to work with or even potentially, transcend these evolutionary influences?
Well, that's a question that researchers and philosophers are actively exploring, and there are no easy answers. But one thing is clear. Understanding our evolutionary past can give us a really powerful lens for understanding our present behavior and potentially making more informed choices about our future.
Can you give me some examples of how this might work in practice?
Absolutely. Let's go back to the example of our innate desire for calorie-rich foods. Knowing that this desire stems from a time when such foods were scarce, we can consciously develop strategies to manage those cravings. We can focus on consuming nutrient-dense foods that provide satiety, create environments that minimize temptation, and practice mindful eating habits.
So it's not about denying those evolutionary urges, but rather understanding them and finding ways to kind of work with them in a modern context.
Exactly. Another example is our tendency towards tribalism. From an evolutionary perspective, belonging to a group provided safety and increased chances of survival. But in today's world, that same instinct can manifest as prejudice and discrimination against those perceived as different.
But by recognizing this, deep-seated evolutionary drive, we can consciously work to overcome those prejudices.
Absolutely.
And build a more inclusive society.
Precisely. It's about recognizing those primal instincts, understanding their origins, and then consciously choosing to act in ways that align with our values and goals.
This is really making me think about, the power of education and self-awareness. The more we understand about ourselves, the more equipped we are to make, conscious, informed choices.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And understanding the evolutionary forces that shape us can be incredibly empowering. It allows us to step back from those knee-jerk reactions, those primal urges, and make choices that are aligned with our higher aspirations.
This has been such an enlightening deep dive. We've gone from the basics of evolution to the intricacies of the human mind, exploring how, millions of years of history continue to shape our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors.
It's been a fascinating journey indeed, and I hope it's left our listeners with a sense of wonder and curiosity about the incredible complexities of human nature.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that while evolution has played a significant role in shaping who we are, it doesn't define our destiny. We have the power to choose, to learn, to grow, and to create a future that reflects our highest values.
Well said. By embracing the insights of evolutionary psychology, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, our motivations, and our place in the grand tapestry of life.
To our listeners, we encourage you to continue exploring these ideas. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of your own mind. Who knows what incredible discoveries await you?
And who knows what incredible future we might create together.